HMNS Dino Dig 2022, Day 5. Let's chat. Welcome to the HMNS Beyond Bones podcast. You've got your mental curator, as always, Johnny Hemberger. It is Day 5 of HMNS Dino Dig 2022, and we actually did not even go to the Wall Quarry today. Today was a day off of sorts. Let me remind everybody listening, especially if you're listening to this podcast in February or January, maybe March, maybe even in Houston, or you're in a more temperate climate. We're out here in literally the dog days of summer. It is mid to late July as we're out here digging in northeastern Wyoming, and it's not exactly pleasant out in the sun. Some days are better than others. The first few days were really hot. The next few days should be a lot better temperature-wise. But when you're out in that sun, in the direct sunlight, 85 degrees, yeah, it feels better than 95 degrees, certainly, but it's still the sun beating down on you. Thin atmosphere, higher elevation, less oxygen. A day off is needed, and that's exactly what we got today. The first half of the day was basically a free day. Before lunch, we had lunch in the conference room of the hotel here, the Devil's Tower Inn here in Hewlett, Wyoming. Wonderful lunch. The lunches provided by the Ponderosa Cafe have been wonderful. Lots of protein in these lunches. And that, if I can make a little side anecdote here for a moment, for some reason I'm just recalling this. I hiked to Machu Picchu once. In like 2015, 16, it was a 4-day hike through the Andes Mountains. And I know some of y'all might be thinking, wow, Johnny, you're quite the hiker. That's quite the endeavor. I am not a hiker. I am not a long-distance runner. I am not a super athletic type. I played varsity baseball in high school. I've played baseball my whole life, basketball, played on JV teams, the whole bit. But yeah, I'm not one of these people, endurance hikers, endurance climbers, endurance runners. No, that's not me. But I still hiked 4 days through the Andes Mountains from Cusco, I want to say, to Machu Picchu. And you might ask, well, how was it? Did it open your eyes? Was it just this amazing experience that you do it again? No, I would not do that again. I would go to Machu Picchu again in a heartbeat. But if it meant hiking 4 days through the mountains again, changing elevations by like 10,000 feet up and down, I still have nightmares about stairs. No, I would not do that again. In fact, at this time in my life, little personal, let you behind the scenes here a little bit. It was not a good place emotionally in my life. So my mind was 1,000 miles away. So I was just kind of 1,000-yard stare, trudging through the Andes Mountains. It was beautiful. It was gorgeous. It was a very cathartic experience being up there above the clouds. All that was great. But I wasn't really kind of paying attention. I didn't do the research beforehand going on this trip to know what the transportation to and from Machu Picchu was like. I just thought, I guess you have to hike 4 days to get there. That's just what it is, and I committed myself to it. Let's go. When we made it through the, I want to say Heaven's Gate. It's not Heaven's Gate. I'm blanking out on what the gate is, the arch that you walk through at the last day of the hike. To when you finally see Machu Picchu down below you, way below you, you still have quite a hike to go to the Machu Picchu from there. Hey, this is your mental curator after the fact. It's the Sun Gate. But it's a very grandiose sight. But imagine my surprise, having gone through this 4-day arduous hike, thinking this is the only way to get to Machu Picchu, when I see buses, tour buses, just at the entrance of Machu Picchu, just at the visitor center. I'm just like, you mean we could have taken a 30-minute bus ride to Machu Picchu? Why the heck did we just walk 4 days through the mountainous jungles to get to Machu Picchu. And again, I know a lot of you listening, probably all of you listening right now, are thinking, well, of course they have buses that go up to Machu Picchu. It's a tourist destination. And yes, in retrospect, of course I understand that. I'm just letting you know. Like I said, I was not in an emotionally good place. My mind was elsewhere. I did not put two and two together that Machu Picchu was a highly accessible place for tourists. And so when I got there after a 4-day hike through the jungle, which I am not built for, and I just see buses, rolling through the visitor center, I felt I was just feeling so many ranges of emotions. But I tell you all that to tell you this. The diet we're eating here in Wyoming doing the Dino Dig is similar to the diet that I had when hiking to Machu Picchu. So very high protein, a lot of carbs, really. And so, because you need that energy, you need that protein for your muscles. Don't quote me on the science of this, but it's important, yes, to replenish your muscles. That you're expending the energy through your muscles. Your muscles need the protein. You need the carbs for the fuel, and that's kind of what I've been eating. What we've been eating up here through the lunches provided by the Ponderosa Cafe. So, bring it all back around to today. We started the first day, free day. We could visit the museums here in Hewlett, just wander around the town. I wandered around and I got some excellent drone shots of this little town, which I will, of course, include in the upcoming YouTube videos and Facebook posts. I've already included some. I'll use this opportunity one more time to plug again. Houston Museum of Natural Science on Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, YouTube. I know when you're listening to these podcasts, you really want to see what I'm talking about, and I am not leaving your eyeballs hanging. Check the links in the description of these podcasts. It takes you to YouTube, it takes you to Facebook, it takes you to Twitter, so you can see what I'm talking about. And when you do see these posts I've made while we're out here, posts of dinosaur bones, drone shots of the Wah Quarry, upcoming drone shots of Hewlett, Wyoming, where we're staying. I did some time lapse of weather rolling in the other day. That's all available on our social media and on YouTube. But you're not even seeing, believe me, this is not even scratching the surface of the video content that's about to come. When I get back to Houston from this trip, I'm going to take my gigs and countless gigs of data, of video files that I've been recording on this trip, and I'm going to put together a really nice documentary, tons of glorious 4K drone footage, glorious 4K close-ups of the bone. My whole point here, my whole purpose in making these videos, in the grandiose video that I'm going to make from this trip, is when it comes to digging the bones out of the dirt, I want you, the viewer, to be in the dirt with us. Yeah, I want to show you the bones and show you these fossils in such up close, amazing detail that you can almost taste the bone, like Chuck did the other day to do the bone or rock test. I put that on Facebook. You can go check out the GIF I made of Chuck licking an indeterminate specimen to see if it was bone or rock or maybe something worse. Turns out it was bone. So you can watch Chuck do that on Facebook. It's a legitimate test. But I was just using that as a segue, using that as a plug to tell you that I know when you're listening to this, you want to see what I'm talking about, see what the members of this group are talking about when they're talking about discovering bones and fossils and seeing what we're seeing. And you're going to be able to do that. And you are able to do that somewhat right now on all the social media. So make sure you're subscribed or following Houston Museum of Natural Science on Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, YouTube, and TikTok. All of those great sources, you can see what I'm talking about here. So back on track, had lunch, and then we went to Devil's Tower. I don't know how many of y'all listening have been to Devil's Tower. You may have know Devil's Tower from popular movies, but that's where we went today, and it was incredibly impressive. You know, we've been staying here in Hewlett, Wyoming, in a hotel called the Devil's Tower Hotel, and you can see Devil's Tower from where we're at, depending where you are on the street, and maybe if you're up in a window, you can see Devil's Tower, several miles away on the horizon. And you're thinking, okay, yeah, you're several miles away. It looks big, but how big could it really be? It's one of those things that when you get the closer you get, just the more grandiose it becomes and the more awe-inspiring it becomes, and you're just thinking, wow, this is huge. Devil's Tower, by the way, is 4 football fields tall. I don't know why they describe it like that, but it's 4 football fields. So imagine, and I imagine they're talking about American football. Tom, if you're listening, not soccer, not a European football, but it's 4 American football fields tall, which is an incredible sight. But it's not so big that you can't walk around it in a day. You can absolutely walk around it in a day. They have several hiking trails. The young bucks today, and I'm calling anybody under 30 years old on this troop a young buck. I myself am 38 years old. They did the 2.8 mile hike, which is not that bad. I take that back. What I mean by not that bad is you might think, 2.8 miles, that's not that far for a hike. The terrain varies. You go up and down. So anytime you're doing these elevation changes on a hike, I know y'all hikers know exactly what I'm talking about. It adds miles. I mean, it adds to the toll on your legs and feet. So the 2.8 mile hike, while I didn't do it, the young bucks did, and even Aiden, are you 17 years old? He said that he was, winded after that, maybe for 5 seconds, due to 17 years old. How winded could you be at 17 years old, 2.8 miles? Even with the elevation changes, it's like, get out of here, Aiden, with this. Oh, it was kind of, it kind of took it out of me. Come on now. Anyways, one of the most inspiring parts of Devil's Tower to me, because I sat out near the visitor center. I went in to check if I could fly my drone around, and they said, no, absolutely not. So I couldn't get drone shots of it. I'll think of another creative way to do something similar to that later on. But I was out in the visitor center. I had my camera aimed up at Devil's Tower, and I got some extraordinary time lapses. So when you go back to watch this footage, you see the clouds just racing by the tower. You see the shadows being cast on its multifaceted faces of the tower as the sun moves through the sky. You see I believe there are turkey vultures flying around the top, casting their shadows against the rock face as they fly around. Absolutely amazing. There were rock climbers up there too. Undoubtedly, you'll be able to see those in the time lapse and in the videos I chose. But the most impressive point of this very small hike, because the smaller hike is the more touristy hike, the hike that almost anybody can do, because it's all paved, it's all cement, there's handrails, it guides you gently, meanderingly around the front of Devil's Tower. But you hike up that a little bit from the parking lot. I would say, I'm trying to guesstimate now, several hundred yards, maybe a kilometer. It's not too bad, but you get to the place where you get this incredible look at the tower from the base of the boulder field. So when the rock face crumbles, and we're going to talk about what the Devil's Tower is made of here in a moment, but when the rock face crumbles, the boulders got to go somewhere, and they form this big, giant skirt around Devil's Tower of massive boulders. I would say the boulders range in size from probably bowling ball to bus size, like our tour bus. If you think about the tour bus we've all been cruising around on, boulders that size, these are huge boulders that weigh hundreds and hundreds of tons that have come sliding down the rock face of Devil's Tower. And it's just, I wasn't expecting how impressive it was. Diane, I am naming you by name right now. Diane, you told me while I was finishing up doing one of my time lapses, I did an 1.5-hour time lapse, one photo every 5 seconds for an 1.5 hours. I passed the time listening to music, Chuck Lay's music, but Diane said, you really should go hike up there a little bit before we have to leave at 6. And I said, yeah, of course, I'll go up there. So she said, yeah, there's some really neat boulders. That's all she said. Diane, that's all you said. There's some neat boulders up there. I said, oh, cool, I can't wait to see that. I was not prepared for what I witnessed, and you will see it in all its glory on YouTube and on Facebook and Twitter and everything once I upload these videos to it. So again, follow the links in the description of this podcast so you make sure you're following all that stuff so you don't miss it. But I got to the bottom of the boulder field, and it just kind of came out of the trees. There's a lot of trees. There's a lot of pine trees around Devil's Tower. That's this part of the world. That's just this part of the United States. And there's just a clearing, kind of a cut between the trees, and then you can see this immense boulder field leading all the way up, line of sight, to the tippity top of the Devil's Tower. You could see it all at once, just kind of breaks through the trees. And I set up my camera there to do more time lapses. The indigenous peoples around here still have a tie to the Devil's Tower, a very close familial tie, spiritual tie, cultural tie to the Devil's Tower. And you'll find prayer cloths and prayer bundles. Basically, the prayer cloths and prayer bundles that are hanging from the trees. You'll see them hanging off the branches, and there are hundreds of them. I don't want to make this connection because I don't want it to make it sound crude, or I don't want it to make it sound disrespectful. But any of you listening who have been skiing or snowboarding, and you're going up the ski lifts and you pass those trees that are kind of come close to the chairlift, and people have thrown necklaces and beads and other articles of clothing in the trees so that they're just, there to remember, I guess. That's kind of what the prayer cloths and prayer bundles look like, as far just insofar as it's something colorful and unique hanging from a pine tree. The prayer cloths and prayer bundles obviously mean way, way more than a beaded necklace hanging from a tree in Aspen. So don't get me wrong that there's any even remote connection of a parallel between what a frat boy has thrown into the tree in Breckenridge and what these indigenous peoples are leaving in the trees at the base of Devil's Tower. These are prayers, these are requests, they can also be simple remembrances of loved ones, and they're most definitely symbols of a connection of their culture. Even right now in 2022, those prayer claws are reaching out across eons to their ancestors who came to the same exact spot for thousands of years, and they're leaving these prayer cloths and prayer bundles to connect with their ancestors. It's extremely moving. And there's people, if you go to the Devil's Tower website, one of the main themes that you'll see as you go to the website, it's a wonderful website, you should go to it. I'll link to it in the podcast description. The main theme of it is perspective. Different perspectives. That my perspective of Devil's Tower is different than your perspective of Devil's Tower. The indigenous people have a different perspective of Devil's Tower. White settlers who came here have a different perspective of Devil's Tower. But the one thing that we all have in common is that Devil's Tower brings all of us together. And we all connect at Devil's Tower, and if you've been to Devil's Tower once, you are connected to it forever, and that is absolutely the case for anybody who has ever been to Devil's Tower. I will never forget Devil's Tower. I was looking up at Devil's Tower just in awe. I was taking that hour and a half time-lapse video, but I just kept looking up at Devil's Tower, just looking up at it. Just looking at all the different creeks and crevices and different forms of it, and being so thoroughly entertained by something that has been static for centuries, millennia, millions of years. And I'm watching it with every bit of engrossment that you would with some sort of big Hollywood movie. The tower isn't moving, but it's more dynamic than anything you'll ever see on TV. Does that make sense? I have a feeling that a lot of you listening right now are making that connection with me. That you just stand there in the base of this tower looking up at it enthralled. More enthralled than you've been with anything you've seen on any moving screen in recent memory, if ever. And another thing struck me as I'm looking up at Devil's Tower. And it's a common theme that occurs around this part of the country. So if you're listening to this podcast and you've never been out to the American West, the American Northwest especially, I don't care where you've been in the world, you need to come to the American Northwest. It will blow you away. It's sensory overload in every regard. You're looking up at this thing that has been here for millennia, that has drawn people here from all over the world for eons. It's this looming, incredibly powerful force of nature that you're looking at, but it is deathly silent. That, to me, is a common theme around this part of the country. If you go to the Grand Canyon, you almost feel like crying because it's so unimaginably beautiful, so unimaginably all-consuming of your vision. But then you check in with your ears, you hear nothing. You see these grand, immense, intimidating, awe-inspiring, breathtaking landscapes. And then it is supernaturally quiet. Supernaturally quiet. It stirs something inside of you. I don't care who you are, what walk of life you came from. Seeing these things like Devil's Tower, Grand Canyon, what have you, stirs things inside of you that you never knew were there. And it can be, I think probably for some people, it can probably be a little bit unsettling to witness these things. At minimum, it humbles you. It must absolutely humble you to see something like Devil's Tower, to be in its presence. Has to stir your soul. It has to humble you. It has to make you more respectful of your fellow human being, your planet. That's what it did for me. And if it did that for me, I would imagine it did it for other people as well. I will start wrapping up this podcast in this way. At the end of this podcast, instead of the normal bump music that I've been using for the past few podcasts here with the HMNS Dino Dig 2022, I'm going to end it using one of Chuck Lay's songs. I mentioned Chuck Lay in the last podcast. We're gonna hear one of his songs on the way out tonight. So I hope you really enjoy it. But I'm gonna wrap up the facts and kind of my takeaway of Devil's Tower with this. You know, we're trying to talk and figure out what formed Devil's Tower. We know it was erosion of some sort. Popular theory used to be that it was the center of a volcano, that it was, the magma chamber or whatever, where magma came out of the volcano, and that weather and erosion eroded the walls of the volcano, the more kind of loose rock that surrounded this chamber, and all you're left with is basically the chimney of the volcano. That's actually, according to my research before opening up this podcast, that's actually not what they believe has happened. What they believe happened, the current conclusion, this is what the wording of my research said, the current conclusion is that it wasn't an actual volcano. It was a magma chamber that did not make it to the surface. So it's a little pocket of, relatively, it's a pocket of magma that almost made it to the surface but got capped off at the top. But that magma hardened into the structures that we see here. They're almost kind of like crystal-like structures, but not really. But it hardened, that extra dense material matrix hardened into what we see at the Devil's Tower underneath the surface that used to be there, and as the sands and sandstone and everything else that got eroded around this chamber went away and moved on and blew away or washed away, that you were left with that magma chamber. So it was never a volcano. According to most current theory, the current conclusion in their words, that it was never an active volcano that spewed lava all around, that it was a magma chamber under the Earth's crust that made it almost to the surface, and through millions of years of erosion, now we see that exposed magma chamber. And to me, that's an even cooler answer than it used to be an active volcano. I asked this question at the dig site, and I forget who answered it. If it was I think it was asking Alex from Black Hills Institute. I asked, "Is there a lot of seismic activity out here?" And he said, "Not currently." So while, yes, the Black Hills uplift is certainly due to geology happening, right now, that magma chamber was also due to geology, was also due to, plate tectonics and the shifting around of the continents and everything. So it's really cool that we get to see an example of a volcano that potentially could have been, but maybe never really made it to the surface. And for some reason, what I'm thinking of right now, not to be too crude, is like a pimple that doesn't quite breach. It's just under the skin and it hurts. Then eventually, bringing it back to geology, it's almost like your skin wears away, and you're left with that kind of just the infected pore. I'm being disgusting now. I digress. Let's bring our emotions down a little bit. Let's prepare ourselves to witness Chuck Lay. So a lot of y'all on this trip have been around Chuck. I call him Paleo Santa Claus. That's what I've been calling him in my head. Paleo Santa Claus. Chuck is a world-renowned Texas music legend. Played with, it's too numerous to even mention. Like I said in yesterday's podcast, I said, I used to jam out to Stevie Ray Vaughan, and Chuck's like, I knew Stevie really well. That doesn't even scratch the surface of this guy's life, of his music career. So anyways, I want to play you one of Chuck's more recent songs. So I'm going to stretch my radio chops here and sign off during the intro of I Lost Her in Tucson by Chuck Lay. So until next time, be safe and be curious.
I lost her in Tucson on a hell of a day. Took off to the canyons and I hitched a ride to LA. She may go to the valley, she might try Delacroix. I lost her in Tucson, she said, well, I see a boy, I see a boy. She's so damn crazy, crazy as a balloon. She's got me breaking down, howling at the moon, howling at the moon. I lost her in Tucson, my reception is shot. Left a ring and a bottle of gin neath a jumping chola. Should've taken a warning, there were signs that I missed. I lost her in Tucson, yeah. They trade by a kiss, trade by a kiss. She's so damn crazy, crazy as a balloon. She's got me breaking down, howling at the moon, howling at the moon. She's so damn crazy, crazy as a balloon. She's got me breaking down, howling at the moon, howling at the moon. I lost her in Tucson on a hell of a day. Took off to the canyons and I hitched a ride to LA.